In 1958, a mother in Pennsylvania fed her family for 7 days after Easter dinner using 1 roasted turkey, 12 hard-boiled eggs, and a pot of leftover mashed potatoes. She never threw away leftovers. She turned them into sandwiches, soups, casseroles, and breakfasts that cost pennies per serving. 1 Easter meal became 7 suppers, 5 breakfasts, and a week's worth of school lunches without spending another dime. Today, we toss Easter leftovers in the garbage after 3 days. Let's count down 30 genius ways 1950s moms used Easter leftovers for pennies and saved money without wasting food. Made turkey, or chicken soup from the carcass, became the most important leftover method in the 1950s because 1 picked clean turkey carcass made soup that fed a family of 6 for 2 full meals and cost only pennies. After Easter dinner, the turkey or chicken carcass, with every scrap of meat picked off, went into the largest pot in the kitchen with water, diced onion, diced celery, diced carrots, bay leaves, salt, and pepper. The pot simmered on the back of the stove for 3 to 4 hours until the bones fell apart and the broth turned golden and rich. The bones strained out, any remaining meat picked off and returned to the broth, and the soup served with noodles, rice, or dumplings. That soup fed the family Monday and Tuesday after Easter without buying new meat or spending money on groceries. Mothers who threw away turkey carcasses were considered wasteful and foolish. Today, we throw carcasses in the garbage. Back then, turkey carcasses were liquid gold that stretched 1 Easter meal into a week of suppers. Ground, leftover turkey into turkey salad became the sandwich filling that fed families for 3 days after Easter and cost pennies to make. Leftover turkey meat cut off the bone and ground through a hand-cranked meat grinder or chopped finely with a knife until it resembled ground meat. The ground turkey mixed with mayonnaise, finely diced celery, sweet pickle relish, a squeeze of lemon juice, salt, and pepper until creamy and spreadable. The turkey salad spread on white bread or stuffed into dinner rolls and served for lunch or light supper. Kids ate turkey salad sandwiches in their school lunches all week. Adults ate turkey salad with crackers or on toast. The turkey salad lasted 3 to 4 days in the icebox and cost nothing except the mayonnaise and celery. Mothers who threw away leftover turkey were judged by neighbors who knew better. Today, we throw away leftover turkey or let it spoil. Back then, ground turkey salad turned 1 Easter turkey into a week's worth of sandwiches and lunches for pennies. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email, too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Made turkey or chicken hash with cream became the Wednesday supper that used up the last of the Easter turkey and cost pennies per serving. Leftover turkey or chicken chopped into small pieces and fried in a skillet with diced leftover potatoes, diced onion, and a pat of butter until the potatoes turned golden and crispy. A simple cream gravy made from flour, milk, butter, salt, and pepper poured over the hash and stirred in until everything was coated and creamy. The hash served in bowls with a side of biscuits for sopping up the gravy. Kids ate the potatoes and picked at the turkey. Adults ate everything and praised the comfort. Mothers loved the fact that leftover turkey and leftover potatoes turned into a complete supper that cost only pennies for the flour, milk, and butter. Today, we throw away leftover turkey and potatoes. Back then, turkey hash with cream was a complete meal that stretched leftovers into Wednesday supper without buying new groceries or spending money. Before we move next, baked turkey turnovers became the fancy leftover meal that impressed guests and cost pennies to make because the filling was free and the pastry was simple. Leftover turkey chopped finely and mixed with leftover gravy, leftover mashed potatoes, leftover peas or carrots, salt, and pepper until thick and spreadable. Homemade pie dough rolled thin and cut into circles, the turkey filling spooned onto one half of each circle, the other half folded over and edges crimped with a fork to seal. The turnovers brushed with milk and baked at 375 degrees for 25 minutes until golden brown and flaky. The turnovers served hot for supper or packed cold in lunch boxes the next day. Kids loved the handheld pies and ate them like sandwiches. Adults loved the flaky crust and savory filling. Mothers loved the fact that leftover turkey, gravy, and vegetables turned into a meal that looked fancy but cost only pennies for the flour and butter in the pastry. Today, we throw away leftovers instead of making turnovers. Back then, turkey turnovers proved that leftovers could be beautiful and delicious. Made hot turkey salad. Casserole became the Thursday-baked dish that used up the last of the Easter turkey and cost pennies because it stretched 1 cup of turkey into a casserole that fed 8 people. Leftover turkey chopped into bite-sized pieces and mixed with diced celery, mayonnaise, a squeeze of lemon juice, salt, and pepper. The turkey salad spread into a greased baking dish, topped with shredded cheese and crushed potato chips or breadcrumbs, and baked at 350 degrees for 25 minutes until bubbly and golden on top. The casserole served hot with a side of green beans or coleslaw. Kids loved the crunchy topping and ate it like chips. Adults loved the creamy filling and the fact that it tasted like comfort food. Mothers loved the fact that 1 cup of leftover turkey, some celery, and a handful of crushed chips turned into a casserole that fed the whole family for pennies. Today, we throw away leftover turkey. Back then, hot turkey salad casserole proved that 1 cup of meat could feed 8 people if stretched properly. 5 ways down, everyone cost pennies. Turkey carcass became soup. Ground turkey became sandwiches. Hash fed Wednesday supper. Turnovers looked fancy. Casserole stretched 1 cup into 8 servings. Mothers stretched 1 Easter turkey into a week of meals without spending money on groceries. Today, we waste leftovers. Back then, waste was foolish. Stirred turkey into turkey soufflé became the fancy Friday supper that used up the very last of the Easter turkey and cost pennies because eggs were cheap and the turkey was free. Leftover turkey, chopped finely and stirred into a mixture of beaten egg yolks, milk, melted butter, flour, salt, pepper, and a pinch of nutmeg. Beaten egg whites, whipped until stiff peaks formed, then folded gently into the turkey mixture. The batter poured into a greased casserole dish and baked at 350 degrees for 35 to 40 minutes until puffed up and golden on top. The soufflé served immediately while still fluffy because it collapsed quickly after leaving the oven. Kids marveled at the puffy dish and ate it cautiously. Adults loved the light, airy texture and the fact that it tasted elegant. Mothers loved the fact that 2 eggs and a handful of leftover turkey turned into a dish that looked impressive but cost only pennies for the eggs, milk, and flour. Today, we throw away leftover turkey instead of making soufflé. Back then, turkey soufflé proved that leftovers could be elegant and fancy. Chopped turkey into scrambled eggs became the Monday morning breakfast that used up small bits of leftover turkey and cost pennies per serving. Small pieces of leftover turkey chopped finely and stirred into beaten eggs, seasoned with salt and pepper. The egg and turkey mixture scrambled in a hot skillet with a pat of butter until the eggs set soft and creamy. The scrambled eggs served with toast and jam for a complete breakfast that kept kids full until lunch. 6 eggs and a half cup of chopped turkey fed a family of 6 for breakfast and cost only the price of the eggs, about 15 cents in 1955. Fathers praised the hearty breakfast before leaving for work. Kids ate without complaint because the turkey pieces were small and hidden in the eggs. Mothers loved the fact that tiny scraps of leftover turkey that would have been thrown away turned into protein-rich breakfast that cost pennies. Today, we throw away small turkey scraps. Back then, every scrap went into scrambled eggs, fried rice, or soup because waste was shameful. Made creamed turkey on toast became the quick Tuesday supper that mothers made when they were too tired to cook anything complicated and needed supper on the table in 15 minutes. Leftover turkey, chopped into small pieces and stirred into a simple white sauce made from butter, flour, milk, salt, and pepper. The creamed turkey simmered for 5 minutes until thick and bubbly, then spooned over slices of toasted white bread. The dish served with a side of canned peas or green beans. Kids ate the creamy sauce and left the turkey on the side of their plates. Adults ate everything and sopped up the sauce with extra toast. Mothers loved the fact that a handful of leftover turkey, a cup of milk, and a few slices of bread turned into a complete supper that cost pennies and required only 1 pot. Today we order takeout when we're tired. Back then, creamed turkey on toast was the answer to exhaustion, hunger, and an empty wallet all at once. Added turkey to vegetable soup became the way mothers stretched leftover turkey into one more meal on Thursday when the turkey was almost gone and the family still needed feeding. Leftover turkey chopped into small pieces and added to a pot of homemade vegetable soup made from leftover vegetables, turkey stock from the carcass, diced potatoes, diced carrots, diced celery, canned tomatoes, salt, and pepper. The soup simmered for 30 minutes until the vegetables turned tender and the turkey warmed through. The soup served with crackers or cornbread on the side. Kids ate the crackers and sipped the broth. Adults ate bowls full and praised the heartiness. Mothers loved the fact that the last few scraps of turkey, a handful of vegetables, and the leftover turkey stock turned into soup that fed 6 people for pennies. Today, we throw away the last scraps of turkey. Back then, the last scraps went into soup because throwing away food was wasteful and foolish, and hungry families couldn't afford to waste a single bite. Stored turkey in glass jars became the method that kept leftover turkey fresh all week and prevented waste. After Easter dinner, all the leftover turkey meat cut off the bone, divided into portions, and stored in clean glass jars with tight-fitting lids. The jars stored in the icebox, and the turkey used throughout the week for sandwiches, soup, casseroles, and scrambled eggs. Storing turkey in jars instead of leaving it on the bone or piling it on a plate prevented the meat from drying out, absorbing odors from other foods, or spoiling before the family could use it. Mothers pulled out 1 jar at a time and used only what they needed for each meal. The jars washed and reused forever. Kids learned early to put leftovers in jars instead of leaving them on plates uncovered. Today we use plastic containers or leave leftovers in the original pan. Back then, glass jars were free storage containers that kept food fresh, organized the icebox, and prevented waste because mothers could see exactly what they had and use it before it spoiled. 10 ways down. Everyone cost pennies. Soufflé looked elegant. Scrambled eggs used scraps. Creamed turkey fed tired families. Soup stretched the last bits. Glass jars kept turkey fresh. Mothers turned 1 Easter turkey into breakfasts, lunches, and suppers all week without spending another dime. Today, we waste. Back then, waste was shameful. Pickled hard-boiled eggs in beet juice became the free snack that used up leftover Easter eggs and cost absolutely nothing because the beet juice was already paid for and would have been thrown away. In 1957, a Cleveland mother named Dorothy had 14 leftover hard-boiled eggs sitting in her icebox after Easter Sunday dinner. Her children refused to eat plain hard-boiled eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so Dorothy opened a jar of pickled beets, drained the bright red beet juice into a clean glass jar, and dropped all 14 peeled eggs into the juice. She screwed the lid tight, shook the jar gently, and placed it back in the icebox. 3 days later, she sliced the pink and white eggs and served them on a platter with crackers, cheese, and sliced pickles. Her children called them pretty eggs and ate every single one without complaint. Dorothy's neighbor asked for the recipe, and Dorothy laughed and said, "There's no recipe, just beet juice and eggs." The method was genius because it cost absolutely nothing. The beet juice was already paid for and would have been poured down the drain after the beets were eaten. The eggs were already cooked and left over from Easter. Dorothy didn't buy a single new ingredient. She just combined 2 leftovers and created a brand new snack that her children loved and that lasted for a week in the icebox. Today, we throw away beet juice and let leftover eggs spoil. Back then, beet juice turned plain eggs into pretty pink pickled eggs that kids actually wanted to eat, and it cost $0. Made deviled eggs, again with new fillings, became the clever trick that let mothers serve the same eggs 3 times in 3 days without the family noticing, and it cost only pennies for the extra ingredients. In 1961, a Michigan mother named Helen made deviled eggs for Easter dinner using the classic filling: egg yolks, mayonnaise, mustard, salt, and pepper. Her family ate half of the deviled eggs at dinner, and 12 halved eggs were left over. Helen didn't want to serve the same deviled eggs again the next day because her husband would complain, so on Monday morning she scooped out the old filling, mashed it with a fork, and mixed in finely chopped leftover turkey, a spoonful of sweet pickle relish, and a pinch of paprika. She refilled the egg whites, arranged them on a clean plate, and served them for lunch. Her husband said, "These taste completely different," and her children asked for seconds. On Tuesday, Helen scooped out the filling again, mixed it with a tiny bit of mashed potato and a dash of onion powder, refilled the eggs, and served them for supper alongside soup. Her family never knew they were eating the same eggs 3 times in 3 days. Helen's method cost less than 5 cents because she only added ingredients she already had in her kitchen: leftover turkey, relish, potato, and spices. The eggs themselves were free because they were Easter leftovers. By changing the filling twice, Helen stretched 12 eggs into 3 separate meals and kept her family happy without spending a penny on new groceries. Today, we throw away leftover deviled eggs after 1 day. Back then, mothers changed the filling and served the same eggs again and again until they were gone. Chopped eggs into potato salad became the Monday side dish that used up leftover Easter eggs and leftover mashed potatoes in one bowl and cost pennies to make. In 1959, a Pittsburgh mother named Margaret had 8 leftover hard-boiled eggs and a bowl of cold mashed potatoes sitting in her icebox the day after Easter. She didn't want to serve plain eggs or plain potatoes again, so she chopped the eggs into small pieces, mixed them with the mashed potatoes, added mayonnaise, yellow mustard, a splash of pickle juice, diced celery, salt and pepper, and stirred everything together until creamy. The potato salad chilled in the icebox for 2 hours, then served cold alongside ham sandwiches for Monday supper. Her children ate the potato salad without complaint because it tasted tangy and creamy. Her husband praised the flavor and asked for seconds. Margaret's neighbor saw the potato salad at a church potluck and asked for the recipe, and Margaret said, "It's just leftover eggs and leftover potatoes mixed together." The cost was pennies because the eggs and potatoes were already paid for, and the only new ingredients were mayonnaise, mustard, and celery. Margaret didn't buy new potatoes or boil new eggs. She just combined 2 Easter leftovers and turned them into a side dish that fed her family for 2 meals. Today, we throw away leftover mashed potatoes and hard-boiled eggs. Back then, mothers mixed them into potato salad and served it cold for supper, and no one wasted a single egg or a single spoonful of potato. Egg salad. Sandwiches became the Tuesday lunch that used up the last of the Easter eggs and cost pennies per sandwich. In 1955, a Baltimore mother named Ruth had 10 leftover hard-boiled eggs the day after Easter, and no one in her family wanted to eat plain eggs. Ruth peeled the eggs, chopped them roughly with a knife, and mixed them in a bowl with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, a pinch of salt, and a dash of black pepper. She spread the egg salad thick on white bread, cut the sandwiches in half diagonally, and packed them in wax paper-wrapped bundles for her husband's work lunch and her children's school lunches. Her husband said the egg salad sandwich was the best lunch he'd had all week. Her children traded half their sandwiches with friends who had boring bologna. Ruth made egg salad sandwiches every day for 3 days until the eggs were gone, and the total cost was less than 10 cents for the mayonnaise and bread because the eggs were free leftovers from Easter. Neighbors who threw away leftover eggs were considered wasteful. Ruth's mother taught her that throwing away food was a sin, and Ruth passed that lesson to her children by making them eat every leftover egg in the form of egg salad sandwiches until the eggs were completely gone. Today we throw away leftover hard-boiled eggs after 2 days. Back then, mothers made egg salad sandwiches and packed them in lunches until every egg was eaten, and no one complained because egg salad tasted better than plain boiled eggs and cost only pennies to make. Mashed potatoes, turned into potato cakes, became the Wednesday breakfast that used up leftover mashed potatoes and cost only pennies for the egg and flour. In 1960, a Kentucky mother named Doris had a large bowl of cold mashed potatoes left over from Easter dinner. Her family refused to eat reheated mashed potatoes, so Doris mixed the cold potatoes with 1 beaten egg, 2 tablespoons of flour, a pinch of salt, and a dash of black pepper. She formed the mixture into flat, round patties about 3 inches wide and half an inch thick. She heated a cast-iron skillet with a pat of butter, placed the potato cakes in the hot skillet, and fried them until golden brown and crispy on both sides, about 4 minutes per side. The potato cakes served hot for breakfast alongside fried eggs and toast. Her children called them potato pancakes and ate them with maple syrup. Her husband ate them plain and said they tasted better than hash browns. Doris's sister saw the potato cakes and asked how she made them, and Doris said, "Just leftover mashed potatoes, an egg, and a little flour." The cost was less than 5 cents because the potatoes were already paid for, and the only new ingredients were 1 egg and a bit of flour. Today we throw away leftover mashed potatoes or let them spoil in the back of the refrigerator. Back then, mothers turned them into crispy fried potato cakes that tasted better than the original mashed potatoes, and the family ate every bite without knowing they were eating leftovers. 15 ways down. Everyone cost pennies or nothing. Beet juice, pickled eggs for free, deviled eggs refilled 3 times, potato salad mixed 2 leftovers, egg salad sandwiches, packed lunches, potato cakes, fried crispy. Mothers stretched Easter leftovers into breakfasts, lunches, and suppers without spending money. Today, we waste. Back then, waste was foolish and shameful. Potato soup from leftover mash became the Thursday supper that turned cold mashed potatoes into hot soup and cost only pennies for the milk and onion. In 1958, a Wisconsin mother named Eleanor had 2 cups of cold mashed potatoes sitting in her icebox 3 days after Easter. Her family refused to eat reheated mashed potatoes, so Eleanor scraped the potatoes into a pot, added 3 cups of milk, 1 diced onion, 2 tablespoons of butter, salt, pepper, and a pinch of garlic powder. She stirred the mixture over medium heat until the potatoes melted into the milk and the soup turned thick and creamy. She simmered the soup for 15 minutes, then served it hot in bowls with crackers on the side. Her children ate the soup without complaint because it tasted rich and comforting. Her husband ate 2 bowls and praised the flavor. Eleanor's neighbor came over for coffee and saw the soup on the stove, and Eleanor said, "It's just leftover mashed potatoes and milk." The neighbor was shocked because the soup looked and tasted like it took hours to make. The cost was less than 10 cents because the potatoes were already paid for and the only new ingredients were milk, an onion, and butter. Eleanor didn't peel new potatoes or spend an hour boiling and mashing them. She just stirred leftover mashed potatoes into milk and turned them into soup in 15 minutes. Today, we throw away leftover mashed potatoes. Back then, mothers turned them into creamy potato soup that fed the family for supper, and no one knew they were eating 3-day-old leftovers. Use mashed potatoes as pie topping became the Friday casserole that turned leftover mashed potatoes into shepherd's pie and cost pennies because the potatoes were free and the filling was made from leftovers. In 1962, a Pennsylvania mother named Evelyn had leftover mashed potatoes, leftover turkey, leftover gravy, and leftover peas sitting in her icebox 4 days after Easter. She didn't want to serve reheated leftovers again, so she mixed the chopped turkey, gravy, and peas together in a greased casserole dish, spread the mashed potatoes over the top like frosting, and baked the dish at 375 degrees for 30 minutes until the potatoes turned golden brown on top. The shepherd's pie served hot with a side of bread and butter. Her children loved the crispy potato topping and ate it like chips. Her husband loved the savory filling and asked for seconds. Evelyn's mother-in-law came for supper and was impressed by the fancy casserole, and Evelyn confessed, "It's just Easter leftovers with mashed potatoes on top." Her mother-in-law laughed and said, "That's exactly what we did during the Depression." The cost was $0 because every ingredient was already paid for and left over from Easter. Evelyn didn't buy new potatoes, new meat, or new vegetables. She just layered leftovers in a dish, topped them with mashed potatoes, and baked them into a casserole that looked impressive and tasted delicious. Today, we throw away leftover mashed potatoes and leftover turkey. Back then, mothers layered them into shepherd's pie and served it as a fancy Friday supper. Potato pancakes became the Saturday breakfast that used up leftover boiled potatoes and cost only pennies for the egg and flour. In 1956, a New York mother named Rose had 6 leftover boiled potatoes sitting in her icebox after Easter dinner. Her family refused to eat plain boiled potatoes again, so Rose grated the cold potatoes on a box grater into a large bowl. She mixed the grated potatoes with 1 beaten egg, 2 tablespoons of flour, a pinch of salt, and a dash of black pepper. She heated a cast-iron skillet with butter, dropped spoonfuls of the potato mixture into the hot skillet, flattened them into thin pancakes, and fried them until golden brown and crispy on both sides, about 3 minutes per side. The potato pancakes served hot with sour cream or applesauce on the side. Her children ate them with maple syrup like regular pancakes. Her husband ate them plain and said they tasted better than hash browns. Rose's sister came over for coffee and tasted the pancakes, and Rose said, "They're just leftover boiled potatoes, an egg, and flour." Her sister was amazed that leftovers could taste so good. The cost was less than 5 cents because the potatoes were already paid for, and the only new ingredients were 1 egg and a bit of flour. The cost was less than 5 cents because the potatoes were already paid for, and the only new ingredients were 1 egg and a bit of flour. Or Rose didn't peel and boil new potatoes. She just grated leftover boiled potatoes, mixed them with egg and flour, and fried them into crispy pancakes that her family loved. Today, we throw away leftover boiled potatoes. Back then, mothers grated them into potato pancakes and served them for breakfast. Stir leftover gravy over biscuits became the Sunday breakfast that used up the last of the Easter gravy and cost only pennies for the flour to make biscuits. In 1959, a Tennessee mother named Betty had 1 cup of cold turkey gravy sitting in her icebox 5 days after Easter. Her family was tired of turkey, but Betty didn't want to waste the gravy. She made a batch of quick biscuits from flour, baking powder, salt, butter, and milk, baked them at 425 degrees for 12 minutes until golden, and split the hot biscuits in half and spooned the reheated gravy over the top. The biscuits and gravy served hot for Sunday breakfast alongside scrambled eggs. Her children loved the gravy-soaked biscuits and ate them without complaint. Her husband ate 3 biscuits and praised the comfort. Betty's mother came over after church and saw the leftover gravy jar in the icebox, and Betty said, "Couldn't throw it away. It's still good." Her mother nodded and said, "That's how we survived the Depression." The cost was less than 10 cents because the gravy was already paid for and the only new ingredients were flour, baking powder, and milk for the biscuits. Betty didn't make new gravy or waste the old gravy. She just reheated it, made biscuits, and turned leftover gravy into Sunday breakfast. Today we throw away leftover gravy after 3 days. Back then, mothers saved every drop of gravy, reheated it, and poured it over biscuits, toast, or mashed potatoes until it was completely gone. Feed, vegetable scraps to backyard chickens became the method that ensured absolutely nothing from Easter dinner went to waste and cost $0 because the chickens were already being fed anyway. In 1957, an Ohio mother named Clara collected every vegetable scrap from Easter dinner: potato peels, carrot tops, celery leaves, onion skins, wilted lettuce, and leftover cooked vegetables that no one wanted to eat. She scraped the scraps into a metal bucket, carried the bucket to the backyard, and dumped the scraps into the chicken pen. The chickens scrambled to eat the scraps and pecked every piece clean within minutes. Clara's children watched the chickens eat and learned that food scraps weren't garbage. They were chicken feed. Clara's neighbor asked why she fed vegetable scraps to chickens, and Clara said, "Because the chickens turn scraps into eggs, and eggs are worth money." The method was genius because it cost $0 and turned waste into profit. The vegetable scraps were already paid for and would have been thrown in the trash. The chickens were already being fed anyway. By feeding scraps to chickens instead of throwing them away, Clara reduced her chicken feed costs and got more eggs from happier, healthier chickens. Her children learned that waste was foolish and that every scrap had value. Today, we throw vegetable scraps in the garbage or the compost bin. Back then, mothers fed scraps to backyard chickens, and the chickens turned scraps into fresh eggs that fed the family for free. 20 ways down, everyone cost pennies or nothing. Potato soup took 15 minutes, shepherd's pie layered leftovers, potato pancakes fried crispy, gravy-soaked biscuits, chickens ate scraps and laid eggs. Mothers stretched Easter leftovers into breakfasts, lunches, suppers, and even chicken feed without wasting a single scrap or spending a single dime. Today, we waste. Back then, waste was shameful, foolish, and unforgivable. Bread pudding from stale rolls became the Saturday dessert that used up leftover Easter rolls and cost only pennies for the eggs, milk, and sugar. In 1958, a Georgia mother named Martha had 8 stale dinner rolls sitting on her counter 3 days after Easter. The rolls were too hard to eat as sandwiches and too dry to serve with butter, so Martha tore them into small pieces and placed them in a greased baking dish. She whisked together 4 eggs, 2 cups of milk, half a cup of sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, a pinch of cinnamon, and a handful of raisins. She poured the egg and milk mixture over the torn bread pieces, pressed the bread down with a fork so it soaked up the liquid, and let the dish sit for 10 minutes. She baked the bread pudding at 350 degrees for 45 minutes until the top turned golden brown and the custard set firm. The bread pudding served warm with a drizzle of cream or a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top. Her children called it sweet bread and ate it like cake. Her husband ate 2 servings and praised the comfort. Martha's neighbor saw the bread pudding at a church potluck and asked for the recipe, and Martha said, "It's just stale rolls, eggs, milk, and sugar." The neighbor was shocked because the dessert looked and tasted like something from a bakery. The cost was less than 20 cents because the rolls were already paid for and would have been thrown away or fed to the birds. The only new ingredients were eggs, milk, sugar, raisins, and vanilla, all pantry staples that Martha already had in her kitchen. She didn't buy new bread or make a fancy dessert from scratch. She just soaked stale rolls in sweetened custard and baked them into a dessert that her family loved. Stale bread turned into stuffing became the method that ensured leftover Easter rolls, and bread never went to waste and cost $0 because the bread was already paid for. In 1960, a Massachusetts mother named Helen had 10 leftover dinner rolls and half a loaf of white bread sitting on her counter 4 days after Easter. The bread was too stale to eat fresh but too valuable to throw away, so Helen cut the rolls and bread into half-inch cubes, spread the cubes on a baking sheet, and left them uncovered on the counter overnight to dry out completely. The next morning, she stored the dried bread cubes in a clean glass jar with a tight-fitting lid and placed the jar in her pantry. 2 weeks later, when she roasted a chicken for Sunday dinner, Helen pulled out the jar of dried bread cubes, dumped them into a large bowl, added diced onion, diced celery, melted butter, chicken broth, salt, pepper, and a pinch of sage. She stirred the mixture until the bread cubes absorbed the broth and turned soft and moist, then spread the stuffing in a greased baking dish and baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes until the top turned golden and crispy. The stuffing served hot alongside the roasted chicken. Her children loved the crispy top and ate it like chips. Her husband loved the savory flavor and asked for seconds. Helen's sister came for dinner and asked how Helen made the stuffing, and Helen said, "It's just the leftover Easter rolls I dried out and saved." Her sister was amazed that bread from 2 weeks ago could taste so good. The cost was $0 because the bread was already paid for and would have been thrown away. The only added ingredients were onion, celery, butter, broth, and spices, all things Helen already had in her kitchen. She didn't buy packaged stuffing mix or waste money on store-bought stuffing. She just dried out stale bread, stored it in a jar, and turned it into homemade stuffing whenever she needed it. Mothers who threw away stale bread were judged by neighbors who knew better. Croutons from leftover rolls became the free salad topping that used up stale Easter rolls and cost only pennies for the butter and seasoning. In 1961, a California mother named Barbara had 6 stale dinner rolls sitting on her counter 3 days after Easter. The rolls were too hard to eat as bread, but too good to throw away, so Barbara cut the rolls into half-inch cubes, placed the cubes in a large bowl, and tossed them with melted butter, garlic powder, salt, and a pinch of black pepper. She spread the seasoned bread cubes on a baking sheet in a single layer and baked them at 375 degrees for 12 minutes, stirring halfway through until the cubes turned golden brown and crispy. The homemade croutons cooled completely. and then stored in a glass jar with a tight-fitting lid. Barbara used the croutons on salads, soups, and casseroles for the next 2 weeks. Her children loved crunching the croutons and ate them like snacks, straight from the jar. Her husband loved the garlic flavor and asked Barbara to make croutons every time bread went stale. Barbara's neighbor saw the jar of croutons on the counter and asked where Barbara bought them, and Barbara laughed and said, "I didn't buy." Her children loved crunching the croutons and ate them like snacks, straight from the jar. Her husband loved the garlic flavor and asked Barbara to make croutons every time bread went stale. Barbara's neighbor saw the jar of croutons on the counter and asked where Barbara bought them, and Barbara laughed and said, "I didn't buy them. I made them from leftover Easter rolls." The cost was less than 5 cents because the rolls were already paid for, and the only added ingredients were butter, garlic powder, and salt. Barbara didn't buy croutons from the store or waste money on packaged toppings. She just cubed stale rolls, tossed them with butter and seasoning, and baked them into crunchy croutons that tasted better than store-bought and lasted for weeks. Mothers who threw away stale rolls were considered wasteful because rolls cost money, and throwing them away meant wasting that money. Wrap leftovers in wax paper became the storage method that kept Easter leftovers fresh all week and cost only pennies for the wax paper. In 1955, a Michigan mother named Evelyn wrapped every leftover from Easter dinner, sliced turkey, ham, hard-boiled eggs, rolls, and slices of pie, in squares of wax paper, folded the edges tight to seal in freshness, and stacked the wrapped bundles neatly in her icebox. The wax paper prevented the leftovers from drying out, absorbing odors from other foods, or sticking together in a jumbled mess. Evelyn pulled out one wrapped bundle at a time, and unwrapped only what her family needed for each meal, and re-wrapped the rest to keep it fresh. Her children learned to wrap their own lunch sandwiches in wax paper and fold the edges tight. Her husband learned to unwrap leftovers carefully so the wax paper could be reused. Evelyn's mother-in-law came for coffee and saw the neatly wrapped bundles in the icebox, and Evelyn said, "It's the only way to keep leftovers fresh without them spoiling." Her mother-in-law nodded and said, "That's exactly how we did it during the Depression." The cost was less than 10 cents for a roll of wax paper that lasted for months, because Evelyn reused each square of wax paper 2 or 3 times before throwing it away. She didn't buy plastic wrap, plastic bags, or expensive storage containers. She just tore off squares of wax paper, wrapped leftovers tight, and stored them in the icebox. The wax paper kept food fresh for up to a week, prevented waste, and organized the icebox so Evelyn could see exactly what she had and use it before it spoiled. Mothers who left leftovers uncovered or piled on plates were considered careless because uncovered food dried out, absorbed odors, and spoiled quickly. Evelyn's grandmother taught her that wax paper was the secret to keeping food fresh, and Evelyn passed that lesson to her children by teaching them to wrap every leftover, fold the edges tight, and reuse the wax paper as many times as possible. Store leftovers in mason jars became the storage method that kept Easter leftovers fresh, organized, and visible in the icebox, and cost $0 because the jars were already in the kitchen. In 1959, Bowen, Iowa mother named Carol stored every liquid and semi-liquid leftover from Easter dinner, turkey soup, gravy, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, and chopped hard-boiled eggs, in clean mason jars with tight-fitting lids. The jars, stacked neatly in her icebox, took up less space than bowls or plates, and allowed Carol to see exactly what she had at a glance. She pulled out one jar at a time, scooped out only what her family needed for each meal, screwed the lid back on tight, and returned the jar to the icebox. The leftovers stayed fresh for up to a week because the airtight lids prevented spoilage, odors, and contamination. Carol's children learned to store their own leftovers in jars and label the lids with the date. Her husband learned to put the jars back in the same spot so Carol could find them quickly. Carol's sister came for coffee and saw the rows of mason jars in the icebox, and Carol said, "It's the only way to keep leftovers fresh and organized without wasting space." Her sister was amazed at how neat and tidy the icebox looked. The cost was $0 because Carol already had dozens of mason jars in her pantry left over from canning season. She didn't buy plastic containers, disposable bags, or expensive storage systems. She just washed mason jars, filled them with leftovers, screwed the lids tight, and stored them in the icebox. The jars were reusable forever, stackable, see-through, and airtight. Mothers who left leftovers in open bowls or on uncovered plates were considered wasteful because uncovered food spoiled quickly and wasted money. And Carol's mother taught her during the Depression that mason jars kept food fresh longer than any other storage method, and Carol passed that lesson to her children by teaching them to store every leftover in a jar, label the jar, and use the oldest jars first so nothing spoiled or went to waste. 25 ways down, everyone cost pennies or nothing. Stale rolls became bread pudding, dried bread became stuffing, croutons topped salads, wax paper wrapped fresh. Mason jars stored everything. Mothers turned Easter leftovers into desserts, stuffing, toppings, and organized storage without wasting a single scrap or spending a single dime. Today we waste. Back then, waste was shameful and unforgivable. Send turkey home with guests became the generous method that ensured leftover Easter. Turkey didn't spoil in the icebox and cost $0 because the turkey was already cooked and the guests were already leaving. In 1962, a Virginia mother named Dorothy hosted Easter dinner for 12 people and cooked a 20-pound turkey that left more than half the bird uneaten. Dorothy knew her family couldn't eat that much turkey in 1 week, so before her guests left, she sliced the leftover turkey, wrapped thick portions in wax paper, and handed a bundle to each guest as they walked out the door. Her sister got turkey for sandwiches. Her brother got turkey for soup. Her neighbor got turkey for hash. Her pastor got turkey for his family's Monday supper. Dorothy's children helped wrap the bundles and learned that sharing food was better than letting it spoil. Her husband helped carry the bundles to guests' cars and thanked them for coming. Dorothy's mother-in-law said, "You're giving away all that good turkey." And Dorothy replied, "Better they eat it than it goes to waste in my icebox." Her mother-in-law nodded and said, "That's exactly what we did during the Depression. We always sent guests home with food." The cost was $0 because the turkey was already cooked and paid for. Dorothy didn't buy new containers, new packaging, or new ingredients. She just wrapped leftover turkey in wax paper, handed it to guests, and sent them home happy with free food for their families. The method was genius because it prevented waste, shared abundance, and strengthened community bonds. Guests remembered Dorothy's generosity and returned the favor by inviting her family to dinners and sharing their own abundance. Dorothy's children learned that food was meant to be shared, not hoarded or wasted. Her husband learned that sending guests home with food was a sign of hospitality and gratitude. Turkey vegetable casserole became the Friday one-dish supper that used up the last bits of Easter leftovers and cost only pennies for the flour and milk to make the sauce. In 1956, a Pennsylvania mother named Ruth had small amounts of leftover turkey, leftover mashed potatoes, leftover peas, leftover carrots, leftover gravy, and leftover stuffing sitting in her icebox 5 days after Easter. None of the leftovers were enough to make a full meal by themselves, so Ruth chopped the turkey into bite-sized pieces, mixed it with the vegetables, stuffing, and gravy in a large bowl, and poured the mixture into a greased casserole dish. She made a quick white sauce from butter, flour, and milk. Poured the sauce over the top of the casserole, sprinkled shredded cheese and breadcrumbs on top, and baked the dish at 350 degrees for 35 minutes until bubbly and golden brown. The casserole served hot with a side of sliced bread and butter. Her children loved the cheesy, crispy topping and ate every bite. Her husband loved the fact that it tasted like Thanksgiving dinner in the middle of spring. Ruth's neighbor came over for coffee and smelled the casserole baking, and Ruth said, "It's just all the Easter leftovers mixed together in one dish." Ruth's neighbor came over for coffee and smelled the casserole baking, and Ruth said, "It's just all the Easter leftovers mixed together in one dish." The cost was less than 15 cents because every ingredient except the flour, milk, and cheese was already paid for and left over from Easter. Ruth didn't buy new turkey, new vegetables, or new stuffing. She just mixed all the leftover bits and pieces together, topped them with sauce and cheese, and baked them into a casserole that fed her family for supper. The method was brilliant because it used up every last scrap of Easter leftovers in one dish, prevented waste, and created a meal that tasted completely new and different from the original Easter dinner. Ruth's mother taught her during World War II that casseroles were the answer to leftover fatigue because mixing leftovers together made them taste fresh again, and Ruth passed that lesson to her daughters by making leftover casseroles every week until the icebox was empty. Feed bones and scraps to the dog became the method that ensured absolutely nothing from Easter dinner went into the garbage and cost $0 because the dog was already being fed anyway. In 1958, an Indiana mother named Alice collected every inedible scrap from Easter dinner: turkey bones, ham bones, gristle, fat trimmings, and vegetable peels, and scraped them into a metal bowl. After the family finished eating, Alice carried the bowl outside to the backyard and set it down in front of the family dog, a large mixed breed named Duke. Duke wagged his tail, sniffed the bowl, and ate every scrap within 10 minutes, crunching the bones and licking the bowl clean. Alice's children watched Duke eat and learned that food scraps weren't garbage, they were dog food. Alice's husband said, "Why do we even buy dog food when Duke eats all the scraps?" And Alice replied, "Because scraps aren't enough to keep him healthy, but they help stretch the dog food and save us money." Alice's neighbor asked why she fed bones to the dog, and Alice said, "Because Duke loves bones, and throwing them away is wasteful when he'll eat them happily." The method was genius because it cost $0 and reduced household waste. The bones and scraps were already paid for and would have been thrown in the garbage. Dog was already being fed anyway. By feeding scraps to the dog instead of throwing them away, Alice reduced her garbage, reduced her dog food costs, and kept Duke happy and healthy. Her children learned that waste was foolish and that every scrap had value, even if humans couldn't eat it. Mothers who threw away bones and scraps instead of feeding them to the dog were considered wasteful because dogs would eat those scraps happily and benefit from the extra nutrition. Compost. Inedible scraps became the method that turned Easter garbage into garden gold and cost $0 because the compost pile was already in the backyard. In 1960, an Oregon mother named Jean collected every inedible scrap from Easter dinner: eggshells, potato peels, carrot tops, onion skins, celery leaves, and wilted lettuce, and scraped them into a metal bucket. After the dishes were washed, Jean carried the bucket to the backyard and dumped the scraps onto the compost pile in the corner of the garden. She covered the fresh scraps with a layer of dry leaves and grass clippings to prevent odors and pests. Over the next 6 months, the scraps broke down into rich, dark compost that Jean dug into her vegetable garden before planting season. The compost fed the soil, and the soil fed the vegetables, and the vegetables fed the family. Jean's children helped carry the bucket to the compost pile and learned that food scraps weren't garbage, they were future fertilizer. Jean's husband built a simple wooden compost bin to keep the pile tidy and organized. Jean's neighbor asked why she composted scraps instead of throwing them away, and Jean said, "Because compost is free fertilizer, and buying fertilizer from the store costs money." The cost was $0 because the scraps were already paid for and would have been thrown in the garbage. The compost pile cost nothing to start or maintain. Jean didn't buy fertilizer, soil amendments, or expensive garden products. She just composted her kitchen scraps, let them break down naturally, and used the finished compost to feed her garden. The method was brilliant because it reduced household garbage, saved money on fertilizer, and created healthier soil that produced bigger, better vegetables. Jean's father taught her during the Depression that compost was black gold, and Jean passed that lesson to her children by always composting kitchen scraps and teaching them that garbage was only garbage if you threw it away. If you composted it, it became food for the garden. Mothers who threw away eggshells, peels, and vegetable scraps were considered wasteful because those scraps could have been turned into free fertilizer. Today, we throw kitchen scraps in the garbage and buy bags of fertilizer from the garden store. Back then, mothers composted every inedible scrap and turned Easter garbage into garden fertilizer that grew next year's vegetables. Save drippings in a jar for cooking became the method that turned Easter turkey and ham drippings into free cooking fat that lasted for months and cost $0. In 1957, a Kentucky mother named Hazel poured every drop of turkey drippings and ham drippings from the roasting pan into a clean glass jar. Let the drippings cool until they solidified into creamy white fat, screwed the lid tight, and stored the jar in her icebox. For the next 3 months, Hazel used a spoonful of the drippings every time she fried eggs, sautéed vegetables, made gravy, or baked biscuits. The drippings added rich, savory flavor to every dish and cost nothing because they were free leftovers from Easter dinner. Hazel's children watched her spoon drippings from the jar and learned that fat wasn't garbage, it was cooking gold. Hazel's husband praised the flavor of the fried eggs and asked what made them taste so good, and Hazel said, "It's the turkey drippings from Easter." He was shocked that something left over from 2 months ago could still taste so good. Hazel's neighbor saw the jar of drippings in the icebox and asked what it was, and Hazel said, "It's free cooking fat that I saved from the Easter turkey and ham." The cost was $0 because the drippings were already part of the Easter meal and would have been thrown away if Hazel hadn't saved them. She didn't buy butter, lard, or expensive cooking oils. She just poured drippings into a jar, stored them in the icebox, and used them for months. The method was genius because it turned waste into a valuable cooking ingredient that added flavor, saved money, and lasted for months without spoiling. Hazel's grandmother taught her during the Depression that drippings were more valuable than butter because they were free and flavorful, and Hazel passed that lesson to her children by always saving drippings in a jar and using them until the jar was empty. Mothers who poured drippings down the drain were considered wasteful and foolish because drippings were liquid gold that could be used for cooking, frying, and baking. Today, we pour drippings down the drain and buy expensive cooking oils and butter from the store. Back then, mothers saved every drop of drippings in a jar, stored it in the icebox, and used it for months to fry, sauté, and bake, and the drippings added flavor and richness to every dish without costing a single penny. These 30 genius ways prove that our grandmothers didn't just save Easter leftovers. They transformed them into weeks of meals, shared abundance with neighbors, fed their gardens and animals, and never wasted a single scrap, because waste meant wasting money their families didn't have. They pickled eggs in beet juice, turned stale rolls into bread pudding, wrapped leftovers in wax paper, stored everything in mason jars, sent guests home with turkey, composted peels, fed bones to the dog, and saved every drop of drippings for cooking. They didn't call it zero-waste living or sustainability or being eco-friendly. They just called it common sense, and they taught their children that throwing away food was shameful foolish, and sinful. Today we throw away Easter leftovers after 3 days and complain about grocery prices. Back then, mothers stretched one Easter meal into 7 days of breakfasts, lunches, and suppers for pennies, and no one complained because everyone understood that food was precious and waste was unforgivable. Which of these 30 ways did your grandmother use? Drop the number in the comments and tell us her story. Share this with someone who remembers when Easter leftovers lasted all week and nothing ever went to waste. Let's honor the mothers who taught us that one meal could feed a family for days if you were clever, grateful, and refused to waste a single bite.